Mr. Owen Murphy, please.
Thank you, Das Cancola. I beg your pardon. Cancola, I don't think that we have ever had a properly functioning housing market in this country. At least if we go back to 2002, since then we haven't had a properly functioning housing market in this country. We have to get involved as a state and as a government. We have to play an active role, and we have to continue to play an active role, I think, for many, many years to come, so we can meet the many needs that different people have in our country today. And one thing that is clear at the moment, particularly as we look at the budget that's just been passed for 2019, is that the government is actively involved in the housing market. We'll spend more money next year in a single year on housing than any previous government has ever spent, €2.4 billion, to go into different solutions to help people in housing need. 1 in 4 of every home, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 of every home built this year and next year will be a social housing home, which I think is quite something given where we've come from. We've agreed the largest affordability package in a decade between ourselves and Fianna Fáil as part of Confidence and Supply. We've brought forward the Land Development Agency to use public land now for house building. And we're doing much more than that around regulations, around different ideas and initiatives like cost rental, conferences on homes for the elderly and how we can wire that into our planning for the future. All the different things that we as a government and the state, through ourselves, through local authorities, through housing bodies and other stakeholders are doing to make sure that we are directly involved in housing solutions for our people, because we have to be. And the purpose of all of these measures that we are bringing in over the last couple of years under Rebuilding Ireland, and will continue to bring in over the following years and on into Project Ireland 2040, is to make sure that we move away from the market-led violent swings up and down that we have seen in our housing sector far too many times in this country's history. Be that in relation to rental prices, the price of a home, the number of people employed in housing, the amount of money we get from taxation from housing-related products and services, or even the pure number of homes being built. 90,000 homes, twice too many being built, falling down to, I think, less than 5,000 a couple of years after that. Tens of thousands of builders and workers losing their jobs, hundreds of thousands of people falling into mortgage distress and all other types of distress as a result of that. What we are trying to get to then is a steady and sustainable output. We talk about sustainable housing delivery. It's not jumping to 60,000 homes next year to fall back to 20,000 homes the next year. It's a consistent output of supply, somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 homes a quarter. We're very close to hitting 6,000 homes a quarter. We'll get somewhere in the region of 20,000 homes, new homes this year, to 25,000 new homes next year. That's sustainable delivery. And the important thing about that delivery is that it's also secure, so that no matter what happens in terms of future economic shocks, there's a committed level of public, government, taxpayer-sourced funding for housing delivery. What's happening in the wider economy, but also that intervention in terms of social housing and affordable housing schemes, and we have that in the ring-fence programme that we have with Rebuilding Ireland, and we have it in some of the new measures that we have to leverage more private finance and different types of private finance. That's not just coming from the Irish sector exclusively, that is coming from different areas to help protect house building and the economy. And we have to include social housing at the core of what we do every year when it comes to housing construction, and we have to make sure that as homes are built, they're affordable. But also, to use that word affordable is not to imply that just because you do not come under an affordability scheme doesn't mean that the other houses being sold are unaffordable. That's not the case. What we're really talking about with affordability is subsidised homes, either subsidised to buy or to rent. So that's what we're trying to do, prevent and protect people from shocks that hurt them, and then find them in emergency accommodation. And when the unacceptable situation, and we've all said it today or before, of people going into hotels today and tonight as part of an emergency response until we have these homes built. We want to make sure that we never have to rely on hotels for families as a type of emergency accommodation. Now, the deputy who brings forward this bill was incredibly condescending to assume to know what I might think about this bill or the arguments that I might make. And, you know, he does not have the responsibilities that a government has. His party does not have the responsibilities that both Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have in establishing confidence and supply. And to dismiss the idea of having to consider unintended consequences is incredibly naive. Of course we have to think of the unintended consequences. The reason we came forward with Rebuilding Ireland as a package across the housing sector is because we had to think about the knock-on effects of different policy proposals that we brought forward. And if you bring things forward in a piecemeal fashion and you don't think about the possible negative consequences, then you could actually do more harm than good. So we have to be conscious of unintended consequences. What led us into the crash that we've had is lots of different ministers and lots of different people trying to do the right thing in most instances, making individual decisions, that those decisions not being joined up, and it leading to the chaos that we had when our housing sector collapsed and it took the economy with it. So my responsibility as a minister is to make sure that I do think of all possible consequences from every policy that's brought forward. And I won't be bullied by the deputy in the way that he presents his arguments, or the way that he and his leader and his party try to treat people in this chamber when we try to have reasonable debate. I think we need to move beyond these personal attacks. I think people are fed up with them. They want to focus on policy. So let me focus on the bill that we have at hand, because I'm not interested in personal attacks. This bill assumes that there are no other streams for social housing delivery today. It seems to ignore the multiple streams that we now have for social housing delivery to protect us from future shocks. Yes, we have Part 5, and we've reformed that, and I'll tell us how in a moment. We have housing bodies now playing a much more active role in the delivery of social housing, partnering with local authorities who have taken back their responsibility and are ramping up the delivery of social housing at the moment. We obviously also acquire homes as well, because there are properties to acquire where we can help people more quickly and often more cheaply than if we were building directly, and we enter into long-term lease agreements as well, because it's another way of the state being able to bring security and safety to people in their homes, adding to the stock of social housing. We can talk about numbers and percentages, and we often do, and the Deputy in his speech outlined this idea of 20 or 25% social housing homes. 1 in 4 homes built this year to 1 in 5 homes built this year, and again next year, will be social housing homes. 20 to 25% of new builds will be social housing homes. Project Ireland 2040 talks about 110,000 new social housing homes in the stock of social housing by 2027, which isn't very far off the figure that the Deputy was giving himself. This year, the stock of social housing will increase by 8,000 homes, next year by 10,000 homes, and these are real social housing homes. They have walls and roofs and doors and windows and gardens and keys. People live in them and they're secure in them. And they're real because they exist, and people then have that security in that home because it's social housing. And we also have to recognise in the solutions that we're bringing about with Rebuilding Ireland and Project Ireland 2040, in terms of the stock of social housing, not everyone will want to live in a social housing home. Many people will be happy to be supported through state supports like the housing assistance payment into the rental market because of the flexibility it gives them depending on where they are in life. So we have to recognise that actual physically built homes is not the only solution for people, and that is programmed into Rebuilding Ireland, which was approved in terms of coming forward with the number of 50,000 homes by the Oireachtas Committee, and we now have hardwired in to our plans for the next 10 years this constant output of social housing homes being delivered directly by the state and with our other partners. This bill also ignores the changes that have been made, I believe, to the Part 5, changes that have been made since we learnt the lessons from the crash. No payment can now be made in lieu for Part 5 homes, so the homes have to be delivered. It's not possible to transfer a site or a part of the site. We can conclude the agreement before bills are able to go on site, because it's all about focus on delivery, of getting the units actually finished for social housing. Bill also ignores the fact that we have a land development agency, which is a different way of going about getting something back for the planning gain that is given when planning permission is given or property is zoned. Part 5 was a way of doing that, and will continue to be a way of doing that. But with the Land Development Agency, we can now strategically acquire land before it is zoned. Master plan it, put the infrastructure in place, get the planning in place, get the zoning in place, all of these things. And the uplift that is normally gotten by a developer, we get, because the state is a developer, and we then use that for dividends, like affordable housing or more affordable homes. And that's the purpose of the LDA. It also ignores the fact that the affordability provisions were stood down previously in 2011. Why? Because affordability wasn't an issue after the crash. 2011, house prices were still falling. They continued to fall through 2012. We were left with 3,000 ghost estates that we are still dealing with, some of them. House prices are still 20% below the peak on average, even though we have, of course, very quickly house price rises in certain parts of the country, though they are beginning to slow. And affordability then, as a result of that, is a different challenge depending on where you are in the country and other factors that are there. But we've now recommenced those provisions in relation to affordability because, of course, there is a huge affordability challenge in the country today. And that's why it's important that the state maintains its involvement, that it has really gotten involved in the last number of years in Rebuilding Ireland, but that involvement maintains now, because what is certain is that as we build more homes, if we want to make sure that those homes are more affordable, not just through subsidised housing, but also through affordability being delivered through things like extra supply, we have to make sure that we are getting involved to make affordability happen. And we've done that through the Rebuilding Ireland Home Loan. We've had, I think, more than 200 million now. The first tranche has been approved in terms of the housing agency approvals, and those should flow down now through the credit committees and local authorities. The rent to buy scheme, which has been very successful in helping young couples to get the deposit together to buy a home. We brought in the rent caps. New legislation is now coming, which is going to enforce better enforce those rent caps and give greater powers to do that. We have the 300 million scheme that we announced in the budget over the next coming years to allow the government to share the burden of the mortgage with the individual or the couple who are looking to buy the home. We have the cost rental that we're trying to do at scale at St Michael's and other places, using new forms of finance like the European Investment Bank, which needs to become a major part of our rental market. So in that way, of course, the state will be staying involved in terms of delivering affordability for a number of years to come. We have to make sure also that as we drive affordability in our housing supply, that we're driving different types of homes. It's very easy to do the 3-bed semi-D. We're very good at that in this country. We're not as good as at doing apartments. That's why we have new apartment guidelines, new height guidelines, provision for greater studios. You don't need to get planning permission to build above the shop now, as long as it's less than 10 units. New guidelines for build-to-rent, which is seeing greater investment. New guidelines for co-living. All of these things, including the consultation process that's begun now in relation to elderly homes and elderly living, are going to help us bring about greater security of housing supply, because the houses that have been brought will meet the needs of people as their lives change, and as all of our lives change, as the economy changes because of the technological revolution that we are going through at the moment. And so, if I could welcome one thing in the bill, to be fair, I would welcome the fact that it seeks to, I think, in some way mirror the provisions that we brought forward with the Land Development Agency in terms of making sure that when we're bringing forward public land for house building, that we are trying to get a social mix. And it's been unclear up until now whether Sinn Féin was in favour of a social mix when it came to housing delivery. We believe that we should use housing policy to support and unite communities, not to divide them. And that's why we came forward with the proposals that we have for social and subsidised housing on public land with the Land Development Agency. And so I hope that is now welcome support for those policies in the Land Development Agency plans. The big risk with this bill is that it will increase the cost of building when it comes to actually building homes. And the Deputy is wrong to dismiss that, because of course the cost of providing those homes at a lower price will have to be transferred onto the build price of the other units on that site. And yes, that could make those homes more expensive to sell, as the builder seeks to then achieve a margin on those homes that are built. And of course, when social housing is proposed in certain local authority areas, local residents in existing homes that are built will object, which they shouldn't do. They'll be supported by politicians, which they shouldn't do. And one of the fears that they suggest is that it will lower the price of their own existing built homes in that area. I think they're wrong on that point. But I don't think it's wrong to suggest that if the builder is going to lose money on a certain or a greater proportion of homes that were to be built on the land, that cost wouldn't be transferred to the homes that are to be built. And so, in trying to achieve affordability with these measures, and without thinking of the other consequences that would come from this blunt instrument, it's actually going to make homes less affordable for young people and young couples to buy. That is what the net effect of this bill would be. It's going to have the opposite intention of what it seeks to do, just like other proposals like the Focus Amendment on preventing evictions sound very good when you hear them instantly, but when you actually drill down into it, could actually see far more notices of termination and could overwhelm the system and actually force more people into emergency accommodation than prevent them from entering. And I think it's also important, when we talk about a steady output of housing, when we talk about all the different measures that are in place to deliver social housing, all the commitments that have been given, all the funding that is there, the programmes that are there to make sure that we have subsidised and affordable housing coming on stream, that we have to get to a steady output of housing. We have to fix our broken housing sector. And then when it is fixed, we can look at other proposals. We can look at different things that we might do when we finally manage to secure the number of homes that we need to be built every year in this country. And we're not too far off that point. But a number of measures and policies have been introduced. People say that they've had enough of different schemes and policies and announcements. And I think actually we're almost at a point where, certainly when we've introduced the regulations around Airbnb, when we've brought in our rent bill, we need to spend more time focusing on delivery and getting those numbers and hitting those targets and doing things to get that delivery within the existing policies and programmes that we have, making sure that if we're bringing forward massive money for affordability, that it's actually being drawn down and spent in local authorities and used to deliver the land for affordable homes. And again, just to come back to the bill in terms of another proposal, one of the things that I think is contradictory in it is that it seems to now rely on private builders to deliver social housing again. I thought we'd learned that lesson. I thought we'd moved away from the provision of social housing by private developers so exclusively. What we've tried to do in all the policy measures that we've brought forward is to bring the responsibility back onto the state, and that is happening. Yes, there's a room for Part 5, of course there is. It's part of achieving social mix. It's part of making sure that we get a dividend back for the gain that the developer gets from getting the planning permission and so forth. But we need this multi-stream development of social housing to protect it into the future, should there be a difficulty in the private side of the economy or other parts of the economy that might put that social housing provision at risk. So to conclude, Ceann Comhairle, The government needs to directly intervene in the market and stay involved in the market, and it is, and Rebuilding Ireland and Project Ireland 2040 and all of the other plans we put in place maintain that commitment. I welcome any support from any deputy in this House for the government's policy when it comes to the mixed development of housing on land, be it private or public. But now is not the time to place extra costs on builders when they already have cost challenges. This bill would make homes less affordable rather than more affordable for the vast majority of people. And again, it outsources social housing back to the private sector when everything we've been doing in the last 3 years is to take that responsibility back. Thank you.
Thank you very much.